For better or worse, it's become one of hip-hop's most memorable trials.
The trial for rapper YNW Melly continues. The rising South Florida rapper is accused of killing two friends back in 2018. Prosecutors say that he tried covering it up as a drive-by shooting, and now his actions in court are going viral.
The victim's family members want justice, and Melly could face the death penalty. Emotions are running high, and here are its most heated moments so far. The confession. On the opening day of the trial, tension was in the air. YNW Melly, whose real name is Jamel Demons, is charged with murdering two friends, YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie. Melly claims that they were killed in a drive-by, whereas the police think he killed them and staged a drive-by to cover it up. With the trial underway, Melly's life is literally at stake. Florida enforces the death penalty, and this is very much on the table for the trial. And Melly's court case could not have come at a worse time. In April, Florida changed the rules. In the past, every single juror would need to find you guilty to enforce the death penalty. But from April 2023 onwards, you only need 8 of the 12 jurors to find you guilty. With all of this in mind, the opening statements were incredibly important. Lawyers from both sides got to set out a bite-sized summary of their case, and prosecutor Christine Bradley did not hold back. She alleges that Melly has already admitted to the killing. When reports came out that Sack Chaser and Juvie were killed, Melly was asked by multiple people on social media if he was okay. In one message, he gives a strange response.
And Mr. Demons responds very succinctly, "I did that." Shh.
There is also the possibility that Melly did not mean a shush sound, but was instead saying a common swear word that begins with sh. Either way, this does not change the substance of what he said, and this quote is used to conclude her opening statement.
The state is confident that you will find the defendant guilty as charged of the first-degree murder of Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams. Thank you.
This one text could change Melly's life forever. There is other evidence, such as where the bullets came from in the car and what type of gun was used, but all of that is circumstantial evidence. If the jury thinks that this is a confession, then that could be the green light to land a guilty verdict. We then get to the opening arguments of the defense. Bradley's opposing attorney, David Howard, wants the jury to take two things into consideration. First of all, he thinks that the investigation wasn't done properly. And secondly, and most obviously, why would Melly kill two of his best friends? After 4 years of investigating, they can't find this motive.
Prosecutors are given great power, endless resources to perform their mission of pursuing justice. But that's not what occurred here.
These killings took place in 2018, and the trial commenced 5 years later in 2023. According to Melly's lawyer, if he did kill two of his friends, the police should have established a motive by now.
And if after 4 years of investigation, the state comes and says, hey, he killed two of his friends, his best friends, and you're wondering why, and their answer is, I don't know. That's the first indication that they're just guessing and don't know what they're talking. That, ladies and gentlemen, by itself is reasonable doubt.
David Howard is one of 3 lawyers working on Melly's side during the trial. Melly originally hired Brad Cohen, who represented Kodak Black. However, his legal team now consists of Howard alongside Stuart Adelstein and Raven Liberty. Melly is understandably getting himself the best attorneys money can buy. Brad Cohen, who worked on the case initially, said that he is confident that the defense will win the case. He has some very fine attorneys that I believe will be able to secure a favorable verdict. Also think that bond will be granted given the weakness of the evidence. Never rush to judgment in cases until you see everything. But the "I did that" text may come back to haunt him. Toward the end of the trial, Melly and his lawyers will make the decision on whether he will testify. If he does get on the stand, the prosecution is going to ask him why he sent this message and will need a pretty good explanation. And later on in this video, we will get to another alleged confession from Melly again. Felicia Holmes' testimony. Among the many witnesses brought forward during the trial, Felicia Holmes was the first one to cause quite a stir. This is how things started off.
How are you today?
Not good.
Are you cold?
No, I'm just, you know, I don't feel comfortable.
Are you nervous?
I feel threatened.
Holmes is the mother of YNW Melly's ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton, who was dating Melly at the time of the 2 killings. On the night, Melly FaceTimed Mariah and said he was in hiding and had just escaped a drive-by. She gave a statement in 2018 about what happened, and the prosecution believes that she lied. What's more, they allege that Melly gave her money to lie for them.
It's clear in terms of you don't want to be here.
You're making me be here. Yes, I have a band on my leg. I'm a nurse. I can't even work properly.
Holmes is asked if she remembers what she said in 2018 and whether she remembers everything she said was truthful. Her catch-all response was that she doesn't remember, and she also gets a bit defensive.
I do remember that they kind of bullied me and threatened my daughter to take her to jail for accessory after the fact. I do remember that.
Holmes continued to say that she does not remember giving the statement in 2018, and things get even more hostile.
I don't remember what I said to them back then, so if I was to tell you something now, I could be lying. I don't want to lie on the stand because you're going to take me to jail.
Many are willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, as this was 5 years ago and she simply doesn't remember. But others, particularly the prosecution, seem to think that she is lying, and this really frustrates the prosecution. Felicia admits that Melly's manager at that time gave her $5,000 to rent an Airbnb, but not for personal use. The prosecution believes that this could be a case of witness tampering. While Holmes may have been unfairly treated by the prosecution, there are some fairly damning Instagram messages from her. She wrote in a message to someone on Instagram, "The promises that were made to us by YNW for me to quit my job and they would take care of us were all lies. They didn't want us talking with prosecutors, but now they have all disappeared. I quit my job based on what Track and his wife or company said. Now look, we can't go home. We spending all my money I worked for and they taking trips and enjoying life. If you think I was a beast before, wait until this trial. I'm not holding anything back. They can call me Ms. Snitch B." When asked if she remembers sending these messages, Felicia says that she simply does not remember. Once the prosecution is finished, Melly's lawyer, Stuart Adelstein, quickly fires back.
When you first took the stand, you said, "I feel threatened."
Yes, sir, I do.
Who do you feel threatened by?
Objection, Your Honor.
With the rules.
Christine Brandon, the prosecutor.
This prosecutor.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Things did not calm down after that. In fact, they started talking over one another.
Excuse me, hold on. Only one of you can talk at a time. You ask the question, counsel, you answer it, and when you let her finish her question, and then when she starts answering the question, you let the witness answer her question, all right?
Then the prosecutor even says that she is lying.
That's a false statement.
Objection.
Excuse me, counsel, you're not testifying, all
I
right?
agree on that.
Excuse me, you asked the question, all right? That's it, you asked the question.
This event led to another heated moment. The defense felt that the prosecutor was threatening Miss Holmes and was bringing up evidence that was not allowed to be used, so they called for a mistrial. The mistrial. A mistrial is when a trial is deemed invalid because something has happened, which means that a fair trial can no longer take place. It can be requested for several reasons, but in this case, their reason is when an error, defect, or misconduct has caused substantial and irreparable prejudice to the defendant's right to a fair and impartial trial. If this is granted, Melly's trial would start all over again, or it could lead to an extremely favorable position for Melly where all charges are dropped. David Howard went on the attack and said,
Mr. Devins has been prejudiced. This jury sat there and watched this fiasco unfold with at least 10, maybe 15 sidebars after every 2 questions.
He then points the finger at Christina Bradley.
And for that reason, we think that it was deliberate. It is highly prejudicial. This jury has been tainted, and we move for a mistrial.
Then Adelstein weighs in.
Judge, in my entire career, I've never heard the state imply with no evidence whatsoever that the defense team would take care of this witness.
For him, the trial is now tainted.
It's so improper. Not only does it taint our client on the other questions, but it taints everybody at this table.
The prosecutor hit back with the fact that the conditions were quite challenging, which probably referred to Holmes being a hostile witness. She also insinuated that the defense is trying to limit what they can ask Holmes because the statements, and particularly the Instagram messages, are so damning to Melly's case.
I was put under very strict and difficult conditions to formulate any question because defense obviously wants to limit, because they know the contents of what this individual has said and all of the statements that she has made that are damaging to their client.
Howard simply hit back and said that the rules were not followed. He said that the jury have been irreparably prejudiced, meaning that the hit trial is now invalid. Whether or not this would go to a mistrial or not was up to the judge. And the truth is that having a mistrial is usually a last resort. And through a written statement, the judge announced that the chance of a mistrial was denied. Craig Tracino from the University of Miami said on this matter, "Once the death penalty is on the table, the degree of difficulty in everything goes up a couple of notches. The tension level's higher, the stakes are much, much higher, the case is is much, much bigger, but the law is usually the same. While this may seem like an L for Melly, the fact that a mistrial was called will help if they need to appeal the verdict if he is found guilty. But without a mistrial, Melly was going nowhere, and the trial continued. Blows a kiss. But there was one particular moment of the trial that got everybody talking.
Jamel Demons, known as YNW Melly or Melly, has been seen smiling and laughing in court, but it was this moment that is now being shared online.
Really?
He appears to be praying and then blows a kiss.
And apparently he did this more than once. Media spoke to YNW Juvie's mom.
He did it a couple times.
Yeah.
So he was doing it a couple times. That wasn't his first time.
The mother of one of the victims was none too pleased and put him in his place.
What you praying for? Because you sitting over there like you don't got no remorse. Like every time I walk in, you smiling. You know, this ain't the time for that. This case is sad. This is serious.
Juvie's aunt said,
"This somebody that we knew. This somebody that we loved. This somebody that we trusted. Like we watched him grow up literally. So this is like a sad case. It's a tragic, and we just praying for justice."
Others have been more sympathetic. This is a trial where the death penalty has been an option, so Melly was just relieved.
I'm sure that he was probably sending a prayer and also just asking for some peace or calming down of his mind. But who knows, because we can't get into his mind frame.
The trial has hours and hours of footage of Melly smiling, and I happened to come across this footage where Melly seems to be having a great time. Melly is getting a pen from one of the police officers, and he starts to put his hands up jokingly to the police officer. We then see Melly trying to clock eyes with someone in the courtroom. Once he sees them, he starts smiling. He is then nodding his head and smiling. Whether it is disrespectful or not, this is certainly not normal behavior for someone facing a double murder trial. Melly has been seen laughing throughout the trial, and he seems to either not be taking the case too seriously or is incredibly confident that he can beat the case. Others believe that YNW Melly might have schizophrenia or a multiple personality disorder. He may not have the same ability we all have to read the room, as he seems to be enjoying himself far too much. The trial itself went viral once again. This time, you could accuse the attorney of not taking things too seriously. His attorney wanted to say something, but wanted to cover her mouth in case somebody lip-read what she was going to say. She covered her mouth with a notebook, and on the front of the notebook read, "Evil plans and stuff." Could she not have brought a different notebook to court? But later on in the trial, things were about to become much more serious. The masked man. In a bizarre turn of events, a witness is taking the stand wearing a ski mask. He is wearing this because he is afraid of giving away his appearance and his life is in danger. The courtroom cameras begin the film below his face, and as the prosecution begins her questions, we soon find out why it is filmed at this angle.
Have there been credible threats on your life?
Yes.
Is there currently a credible threat on your life?
Yes.
He then reveals that he has a bounty on his head.
In terms of is there an amount of money assigned to the death of you that has been offered up?
Approximately $50,000.
Then the prosecution then gets into more detail as to why his life is in danger. He was asked about his need to cover his face.
To protect my family. So I'm not walking around Broward County, Palm Beach County, Dade County, anywhere, and get ambushed by someone that might be looking for me.
The prosecution was deeply against this choice of witness. The jury might think that Melly is a dangerous man because an officer needs to disguise his face in front of them. It could also make the jury think they, as jury members, may be in danger too. One juror even wrote to the judge, "I need a moment. I can't listen properly. When I was a child, I seen someone get robbed and I am having an anxiety attack." And there are even more problems with this mask. Melly has the right to see the person who is giving evidence against him, and we only say so much with our words. A big part of human interaction is in our facial expressions and overall demeanor. The prosecution believes that the mask is all a big gimmick.
What time did you get to the courthouse today? Sit outside.
Just after 9 o'clock.
And were you wearing that mask?
No, sir.
In fact, you've been sitting out there for at least an hour unmasked.
The masked man responds to this with,
No one knows who I was out there. And I was under the impression I wasn't going to be allowed to wear the mask.
The defense tried to prove that the mask is just theatrics, and they came up with a potential gotcha moment.
Sir, are you aware that the picture along with your family is on the internet as we sit here today?
Nope.
After a quick search online, the defense was able to find a picture of him and his family.
This is a picture of mask. That is you and your family.
Yes, sir.
And that's on your wife's Cash App,
Yes, sir.
which is available to anyone
The witness was allowed to continue wearing the mask because the picture was something his wife put up and not by him. He was then allowed to call his wife and tell her to get rid of that photo. But all of this commotion derailed the investigation. This man was essentially here to prove he was Melly, a member of a gang, and he believes that Melly is a member of the G Shine Bloods. He said that Melly has made many gang signs affiliated with this group, and this is sometimes even enough to prove his membership. His argument was, if a famous person were to false rep G Shine, they would quickly get checked, and the natural enemy of the Bloods is the Crips. Their hatred of this gang even extends to the use of the letters. According to messages on Melly's phone, he often substitutes the letter C with the letters B, K, or X in messages, which can be an indicator of affiliation with the group. Having a masked man in the courtroom was sure to draw up some tension, but there was another heated moment that came from an unlikely source: printer issues. In a trial where a man's life is on the line and two families are awaiting justice for a family member, one of the most heated moments of the entire trial was over a printer.
I don't know, you're saying they're sent, counsel suggesting she hasn't received those things. I just want her to get copies of it. I don't want your constant back and forth. Well, she has to, just give her the copies. That's it. It's easy. Just get her the copies.
So here's what happened. The state had documents they wanted to focus on in the trial, but they needed to share these documents with Melly's team. However, the defense said that they did not have a physical copy of these documents, so they asked the prosecution if they could print them off. This is being asked by Melly's attorney, Raven Liberty. The prosecution responds with,
Printed, I found all of them. If there's one that she's missing, I'm happy to do so. Pull them up again. I printed them all this morning.
The judge asked Christina if she could share printed documents with the other side. This request seems to be a lot more difficult than anticipated, and here comes the back and forth that ticked off the judge. Christina can see that Raven is holding documents when making this request, so asks which documents is she missing.
I'm happy to do so. I just need to know exactly which one she says she's missing and which one she says she has. I don't want to have to duplicate them.
This passive-aggressive battle goes on. It seems like a simple request to print out documents, but is a lot more than that. The defense looks to be alleging that the prosecution is not sharing all of the evidence fairly, and the prosecution is hinting that they already have the documents. The judge seems to simply not care and just wants them to print out the documents. While the moment itself seems quite trivial, there is actually a bit more to it than meets the eye. The prosecution needs to share all of the evidence they have with the defense, which allows both sides to assess all of the information being discussed.
This is a fundamental fairness. You have evidence, you need to turn it over to him. If you didn't turn it over to him, you can't use it. That's really the basic.
Juvie's mom. While this spotlight is very much on Melly on this trial, the families of Juvie and Sack Chaser and the real victims, whether Melly is guilty or not, they are the ones who have lost a loved one. And next up on the stand was the mother of YNW Juvie. The defense did not like the fact that she was asked to be a witness.
We would respectfully suggest that suggests that these two decedents knew nobody in this world except their family.
Melly's lawyer had 2 points to make. For the case to be more objective and fair, the prosecution should have identified witnesses that were not related to any of the victims. Since they have brought on a witness who is, they should show some proof that they have reached out to other witnesses. Like the masked man, there is an element of prejudice in her appearance on the stand. The masked man will evoke fear in the jury, whereas Juvie's mom will evoke sympathy. And the whole process of the trial is not to appeal to their emotions, but get a solid judgment of what they think happened. And of course, this is a witness that the defense can't go too hard on either. Were this a mutual friend of Melly and Juvie, this would have made this a lot less biased.
There would be a complete record. To be able to put on the record a good faith effort that it made to identify anybody on this planet that knows these two decedents other than their family.
But in fairness to the prosecution, they probably had difficulty finding witnesses. As I mentioned earlier, Melly may have gang affiliations, and there is a golden rule in hip-hop that you never snitch. With Juvie's mom, we have a grief-stricken mother looking for justice and was one of the few witnesses that would not be in danger afterward. What she does is confirm the identification from the CCTV footage. She confirms that Melly entered the vehicle in the driver's side seat, whereas her son is on the other side. The prosecution will bring on experts later on to prove that this is where the bullets came from, so this is incredibly important. The Snapchat videos. One of the biggest issues of contention in the trial was whether Melly's Snapchat account could be used against him. Believe it or not, the police can still retrieve Snapchat messages that have disappeared from the account. A huge part of the social media app's appeal is that the information you post is only temporary. However, if the police need to retrieve messages, Snapchat will provide them. The first thing Howard points out is that the Snapchat account is not linked to a particular device.
You can access that Snapchat account from your computer that's right before you. So a Snapchat account or any social media account is not particular to a device.
This is really important because Melly's location on the night of the killings is crucial. And secondly, the defense argued that the prosecution wanted to use Melly's Snapchat account to paint him in a particular light.
Conversations between him and any person that might cast him in a poor light because of the manner in which he communicates. How is that relevant to this case?
He goes on to say that some messages were taken from long before the killings occurred.
There are statements there that, in the conversations, that started on October 3rd. October 3rd, this incident occurred on the 26th.
And because Melly already had previous convictions, he and his crew were incredibly careful with their phones. They would sometimes switch them interchangeably, which means that the prosecution has to prove that the phone being used is Melly's phone. However, there is some pretty damning evidence on Melly's Snapchat. 2 weeks after the killings occurred, Melly sent some pretty interesting messages to his then girlfriend. He seems to be incredibly complimentary to YNW Bortland, the person who is alleged to be Melly's accomplice. Melly wrote, "This saved my life. He coming everywhere with me because of them crackers. Come grab him. It's my fault you forgot," Melly wrote, referring to Bortland. "I keep Bortland with me cause at the end of the day he did one of the realest shit in my life." This is much like the "I did that shush" message we heard at the start. Melly is talking about something but not indicating exactly what he is referring to. The judge concedes that some Snapchat evidence could be used, whereas some couldn't. Snapchat videos with Melly holding cash or guns could not be used because it was too prejudicial. This motion results in Melly fist bumping his lawyer. Again, Melly is seen conducting behavior that seems incredibly casual for a courtroom. The confession. The prosecution claimed that they had yet another video of Melly confessing to his crimes. 1 month after the killings, Melly filmed a suspicious video on his phone. The rapper says the following words: "There's no regrets for the that I did for that to die." Both of them never say when. So the prosecution used this information against him. Bradley quotes him and says, "And there's no regrets for the that I did," including the derogatory word that I refuse to use for African Americans. And he then takes the pen and puts it to his head in the shape of a gun, like pulling the trigger, throws up a blood gang sign. And then he says both of them never say when. So the interesting part of this video is it was 1 month to the day after the shootings occurred on October 26th. However, there could be a different reason why he was saying these words. In Kevin Gates' song 4:30 a.m., he raps, "No regrets for the I did. That also mean for the as I killed." Melly was essentially quoting a rap song. The defense released a long statement saying, whether due to cultural ignorance, a lack of investigative rigor, or purposeful deception, it appears police and prosecutors have centered their prosecution of extremely serious charges on an embarrassing, avoidable mistake. The statement highlighted how flawed her argument was. Violent imagery and music is not new. For the prosecution to use this video in a criminal proceeding is as credible as using a video of someone singing Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues, "I Shot a Man in Reno Just to Watch Him Die," or Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, "Mama, I killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead." In a prosecution, the reliance on this legal gimmick, in effect putting a specific type of music on trial, highlights the weakness of their case and the general lack of evidence. Moreover, the racial aspects of this type of misleading, selective prosecution are painfully obvious. The defense was also frustrated that Bradley wanted to use Melly's song "Murder on My Mind" as part of the trial. This is something that is becoming increasingly common, where lawyers everywhere are trying to use hip-hop lyrics in court as evidence and not separating the art from the artist. Lyrics were also used in the trial of Young Thug to paint him in a bad light too. What Melly's defense eloquently explained is that lyrics are a form of artistic expression and not an account of his actions. When Bob Marley sang "I Shot the Sheriff," he was not arrested because he was obviously not literally saying that he shot a sheriff. And the same should obviously be applied to Melly too. As Melly's trial continues, there will undoubtedly be even more drama as it comes to a close. Whether Melly is guilty of committing those crimes on that fateful October night in 2018 remains to be seen.